Hey, what's up, guys and gals? I might have been here for a vacation for a few weeks now, but rest assured, Rauta is not so much as a vacation. I'm still doing these videos and all that stuff. Um, Being here in a kind of a vacation mode have given me the time and space to kind of get my thoughts clear and been reading various articles every now and then. And one thing which I encountered during this vacation was an article about how bands should be more relevant, and that means not only releasing an album every few years and then touring, but kind of keep releasing stuff in a kind of a more quicker phase rather than just going with albums every now and then. Now, obviously, this has divided people into a few groups. Some people say that, hey, that's kind of outrageous. We're not in the mood or doing singles, or this applies only to pop music and all that stuff. But just wait a little bit before we get into this debate or conversation of how things are or how they should be. First of all, let's consider that recorded music is rather new thing. I think it was mentioned in the Arts Code interview, which already got me thinking a couple of years ago, that it's very true. Recorded music has only existed for a few decades. Prior to that, music was just a live thing. Now, if it meant there was a bard in a corner of some shady tap room or tavern, I mean, that's what was going on. Maybe those songs were played in some court of a king, or maybe some, bonfire thing with a man, if a flute or guitar or whatever. The thing here is, music has been traditionally, played live, and recorded music is rather modern invention. Now, when we're talking about recorded music here, which is obviously the case here, not so much about live versus recorded music, we also have to remember that before the era of LPs and CDs, music was actually made kind of like single based. That is, music was broadcasted with radio and stuff. That is way before music videos kind of started to do the same thing. You really didn't have an album back then. You had singles, be it about Beatles, be it about Elvis Presley and the like. I mean, we're still talking about rock music, which is then again the father of metal music, obviously. So back in the days, it wasn't just the popular music, even though we kind of could consider or debate whether everything that was aired on radio is, after all, a popular music, rock or otherwise. Now, the thing here is, back in the days when you didn't have those record players, they were only for few and rich, the only music you heard were the singles. So singles were recorded, maybe B-side and all that stuff, but music was just kind of released every now and then. And albums would finally follow, but I mean, music wasn't really done for albums. Now, when times passed and, LP players, CD players, different kind of amplifiers and whatever became cheaper and kind of all like every man's things, commodities for the average Joe and whatever. Obviously, music started to adapt to this one, and somebody, I guess, along the way came with the idea of album-oriented music. So you might have heard a term called AOR, album-oriented rock. Somebody later on decided that it would mean adult-oriented rock, but I think that's just kind of fucking with the words and all that stuff. Basically, what it means is that this music is meant for an album, like reading a big book instead of a short story. So rather than doing just single songs and then just figuring out how to create more of the same stuff, the music was meant to do, for an album, like maybe for 40 minutes of music, where each song would kind of support one another, or rather being an album with a concept, maybe, rather than being kind of a singles compilation. Nevertheless, whatever the true story behind it, or the origins of this AOR thing is, it's obviously a very different approach to just creating singles and then compiling them into a compilation. And one could even say that this is a nice invention but it's also a very new one. I mean, come on, before maybe 70s or maybe even 80s, that wasn't so much a thing. So we are now having this thing kind of for granted. We take it as a given thing that music is always meant for albums. But back then, I mean, we really didn't see the coming of the digital age, which then again has changed the game. I mean, be it Spotify, be it YouTube, maybe the one of the most used platform for music. The how music is distributed and listened to has changed a lot. Now, if it was for the radio back in the, I don't know, 60s and before that, and or maybe until 70s very much, and how the music started becoming onto albums later on, we're now going back to the kind of a basics. Some say it's new school, like, hey man, we don't want to listen to these single songs, we just want to listen to full albums because it's the modern day. But actually, I mean, yeah, it's modern day, but going with the more modern approach, like listening to single songs, is actually older than that. Because, like I said, back in the times of radio and broadcasting, that was the thing. Also with the music videos on MTV, that is music television, when it was still about music, not reality TV, that was all about doing these single songs. So my point here is that it wouldn't be so far-fetched to see even metal bands going for more of a single release, or batch of single songs, say EPs, MCDs, whatever, and releasing those kind of more frequently rather than going for album-oriented rock, which then again is kind of a dad music approach, if you know what I mean. So I don't know if metal has kind of gotten itself in this kind of a time capsule kind of a thing, like, you know, so this thing was invented in the 80s, we still have to cherish this modern invention. Because, I mean, it's already quite old and it's becoming, I think, more obsolete once again. So I don't know how bands will actually react to this. Maybe this is now old-fashioned to record a full album every few years, rather than, I don't know, releasing a couple of songs every now and then, maybe in a span of a few weeks even, at least a few months. So a band going for a 10-track release, called an album, could actually do one track now, the next one maybe next month, and all that stuff. Like every few weeks, every few months maybe, and then compile all these as an album. Because after all, you can't really go for a concept thing, even if the frequency between these releases is different. It's not that much of a different from songwriting perspective. I'm obviously talking about just myself and my own bands, but I mean it could be happening with other bands. Obviously booking a studio for every few weeks is kind of a costly and not very smart in budget-wise. But especially those bands that have their own studios, maybe even a kind of a garage setup, bedroom black metal if you will. I mean, it's totally doable. Just set up now your own recording thing, do a couple of songs, maybe just one song, and finish it and release it. And then come back after a few weeks and do the same and all that stuff. And what I'm trying to say here is that that is not so much bullshit what Spotify CEO is saying about bands being more relevant this way. Because after all, you know, everybody claims to be so goddamn underground and all that stuff. Like, hey man, I only go for vinyls and tapes, I don't even do CDs. But still people, what they actually do is listen to YouTube. Maybe full albums, maybe just single songs. Depends how things have been uploaded. Whether it's a playlist that is actually an album made of individual songs. But still, I mean, it's not the same that when you put an LP and you don't even have the option called randomize. You just play the songs basically in the order they're due, done. But even with LPs, you can just basically, I don't know, keep rotating side A, and that way you're anyway kind of fucking up the system. That is the order of the songs. And with CDs, even though they are this kind of a random function, I guess most people just go from the first track to the last track. And that's how it goes. But when we're talking about Spotify, when we're talking about YouTube stuff, it's different. So I wouldn't be surprised really if we were going back to this age when these songs were actually done in the way that individual songs are recorded and then released and that same pattern keeps going on and on and on, and only after a few of these single songs a compilation would be released. Will this be happening? I kind of doubt it, but could I see it happening? Very much so. And like I said, not only in pop music or kind of a non-metal music. I would very much see it happening in metal music. And to be honest, I would be curious if this is going to happen. However, I think most metal bands are kind of a conservative, that is old-fashioned, and they are not very happy to embrace this kind of approach to recording music. But we'll see. What are your thoughts? Could you imagine seeing single songs and compilations versus the traditional albums? And why so? Talk about rational point of view rather than emotional, like, I just don't like it because it doesn't really feel good. What are your thoughts? Put your comments on the comments box below and I will get back to you. And in case there's a lot of commentaries, maybe we will do a part 2 video. Right. Anyway, have a good day and take care.